Festival like this is a beautiful indication of the kind of thing that I truly, truly believe in, and I think makes our society more whole and more pure.
We do not take it for granted that Boulder was chosen as the first North American satellite festival. It's a huge honor we will not forget, and we are enriched because of it. We are indebted to both the local and international people that came together to make that happen, and we hope it's a tradition that continues for decades to come.
Literary festivals like this one build up an environment and an ecosystem to nurture readers and to promote the business of books. They provide an invaluable forum for writers to connect with other creative people.
We sit there peering into those electronic grids in front of our eyes, and it only increases the desire to see the real thing in the flesh. To actually hear an author speak firsthand, to read from their work, to hear the tones of their voice modulate as they read their most treasured passages of prose.
For us, it's special. This was our mothership, and it continues to be. The other editions that we have across the United States are smaller versions, different programming, but smaller versions.
Welcome back to the last session of the day today. On behalf of JLF Colorado, Festival co-directors Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple, Teamwork Arts, Boulder Public Library, and the City of Boulder, we welcome you to this session. Running Toward Mystery, the adventure of an unconventional life, the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi in conversation with Mayank Shekhar. This is a vivid account of a life dedicated to the path of truth, devotion, and human connections across all barriers. The Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi shares the lessons learned from the mentors who shaped his life. The revered monk and teacher is also the president and CEO of the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformative Values at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's an innovative thinker, philosopher, educator, and a polymath monk. In this session, he's in conversation with journalist Mayank Shekhar. Mayank Shekhar is an award-winning journalist, podcaster, and author, most recently of Name, Place, Animal, Thing, a non-fiction on India and mass culture. He's currently an editor with Midday newspaper, where you can read his popular weekly column, MS Word. We're delighted to have Launchora as the podcast partner for this session. This conversation will have a Q&A section, so please feel free to send in your questions. Do follow our handles on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be notified of all our upcoming sessions. Also, please stay tuned in to the jlflitfest.org/Colorado for the full schedule and information about our speakers. JLF Colorado is being brought to you without charging a registration fee. Please consider donating as generously as you can to ensure a free, seamless, and continuous flow of knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, Running Toward Mystery, the adventure of an unconventional life, the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi in conversation with Mayank Shekhar. Over to you, Mayank.
Thank you, Shrupa. Welcome to JLF Colorado, Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm presuming you're in California,
I am for the moment.
right?
It's a pleasure and delight. Thank you.
And it's what, 8 o'clock for you? 8 p.m., 8:30? What is it?
Something like that. I think it might be 7-ish. Yeah.
7. It's not. That's not as bad as what's happening here in Bombay, which is where I am. It's around 8:30 in the morning. And for people like me who pretty much wake up late, I want to actually ask you if there's anything in Buddhism that sort of, or actually any religion or any philosophy that looks at the world as morning people and night people. Some people simply sleep very late, and some people sleep, and the two rarely meet. They're like two kinds of people in the world. Have you ever encountered anything of this nature?
Yes, quite a lot actually. If you come to MIT someday, you will meet some of my students who actually prefer to observe a 36-hour workday, and then they go to sleep for another 10 hours after that. I think being a morning or a night person is preference of the individual. What I actually suggest oftentimes is, of course, not to be sleep deprived, that is a major issue of our time. As a society, I don't think we have ever been as sleep deprived as in the last 50 to 60 years. So it's a whether you want to be a morning person or a night person, just get plenty of sleep.
But is there especially with with monastic life or being a monk and across across religions, I've noticed there's a lot of weightage given to waking up early in the morning and sleeping early too, right? I mean, do you think it also comes from a time because there was no electricity back in the day and you really had to sleep early and wake up to get the maximum number of hours of daylight? Do you think that could be a reason?
It could be a reason more for sort of agricultural and farming society, but from a spiritual perspective, I think there is something quite mystical about dawn. The light of dawn and the feeling of being in dawn, and also the sense of quietude that you experience in dawn. Just at the cusp of between, say, 2 a.m. and 4:30 in the morning, you get to observe the stillness, the quietness, except for when you're in Times Square, it's chaotic all the time.
Right.
But otherwise, you get to sort of experience the stillness and silence.
Or Bombay, for that matter.
Or for Bombay, for that
Yeah.
matter. That's true. Yeah. But I think there's something beautiful about being there in the morning, and just being there in dawn. Yeah.
And as a practicing monk, would you consider that a better time to meditate, for instance, between 2 a.m. and 4:30?
Generally, I mean, in my own case, that is often the thing. My day generally starts around 3:30 or 4 in the morning. Despite of what the popular thinking is, I often suggest people that you should try to meditate when you're feeling really high energy. Oftentimes people want to meditate when they're already sort of low energy, or they say that, I would like to meditate at the end of the day, when I'm done with everything. But then what happens is, rather than meditating, they just fall asleep, because the relaxation response of human bodies is quite funny in that way, that the moment it experiences just even a bit of relaxation, it goes into this zone of letharginess, because it doesn't know how to relax and be awake and be sort of alert. So much of sort of initial, training and meditation is about how to sort of maintain the balance of relaxed and wakeful state.
Right. I mean, we're of course talking to each other in different time zones because these are the times of COVID, as it were. It would have been lovely to meet you, of course, in person. Would have been. So by the way, is 7 o'clock past your bedtime? Because you're going to be up at 3:30.
No. I think if you had caught me in Cambridge and at MIT, generally the bedtime there is in line with the student life. So I'm generally up until 11 or midnight. These days, because of COVID, the past 10 months, I think I've been going to bed roughly around 9-ish or 9:30ish and waking up much earlier.
Fair enough. These have been extraordinary times, Venerable, in terms of course, I mean, I don't think humans who've lived for as long as most of them who have been on this panel, seen something like COVID as an experience. People staying in, people, working from home, sitting at home for hours and hours and end. I'm wondering what you make of it in terms of, do you think it could have possibly made us, for lack of a choice sometimes perhaps, made us more introspective than we've ever been?
One would hope so, and I think that would have been a good outcome if we had sort of changed our mindset towards COVID a lot of people have complained about being lonely during these times, or a sense of alienation.
Right.
But rather than loneliness or alienation, if we had sort of understood more in terms of the language of solitude, or in the language of introspection, I think that would have been a good learning curve. I mean, what COVID has offered, regardless of all the challenges, what it has offered is a grand social experiment that we couldn't have designed, even in sort of best case scenario. When you have, large chunk of population left to their devices alone, where we sort of really come to understand the beauty of connectivity, in the sense that we had taken human connection for granted. We had taken so many things for granted that in the last 10 months of disruption, we have, at least begun to sort of think about what are truly essentials in our lives. And hopefully, these learnings will continue, and we won't go back into some kind of mechanical rut after the vaccines become mainstream.
Right. Do you think it's also probably brought us closer to the idea of mortality in a way that we've never known before?
In certain places, yes. Growing up in India, mortality was kind of right in your face. You walk on the streets and you see, dead bodies passing here and there. And so, once in a while, you will at least, be triggered that, there is something called mortality. In the Western society, or in a lot of other societies, what has happened is that we have given death a very cosmetic look. There's a lot of denial that happens around death, or how my late friend Thomas Keating used to suggest that death has a very negative PR, very bad PR in the West. And I think, one of the key things with death or mortality is that, it sort of gives you this deep sense of reflection that our time is in fact finite. And because the time is finite, it should be treated as something that we deeply cherish. Not to take our days for granted, not to take our relationships for granted, not to simply presume that things are going to last like this forever. So, when even in spiritual terms, when we talk about mortality or death or introspection on that regard, it's not to make people feel down. It's simply to say that, cherish every moment that you have, cherish every relationship that you have, because things will change, and sometimes things will change unexpectedly really fast.
Do you consider that as one of the defining features of the Western and the Eastern cultures? For instance, if you look at death and the way, say, Hindus treat death is a very loud ceremony almost. Everyone cries, cries their heart out, and the dead body can be seen by everyone. Practically is laid in the middle at the center on the pyre, as it were. Whereas it would be almost the opposite. Let's say if we look at a death in a Christian family, which is supposed to be a very somber affair, everything's closed. Is that something that you see as a difference between how we look at death per se between two cultures?
I think in most of the Eastern traditions, death is a very raw experience in some ways, meaning that it sort of brings it very closer to how nature is, meaning the cycle of birth and death. I think what happens oftentimes in the West is because of, again, as I said, the cosmetic nature around death. So they do have something called, open casket funerals, where you actually go and pay respect to dead body. But when you look at the body, it's sort of layers of makeup and wearing like a 3-piece suit if it's a man, or wearing like this beautiful dress if it's a woman. Meaning, again, taking away from this aspect that this thing is now coming to an end. This particular chapter is coming to an end. And I think that does take away certain things in the sense that we don't wish to think of it readily. At least we don't wish to think of it in our own sort of day-to-day experience. Yes, death happens. It'll happen to people who are old or people who are sick, but we never think that it'll happen to us or it'll happen to us all of a sudden.
And why do you think that is so? Is it the fact of avoiding the idea of death just makes life a little more worthwhile, as against constantly thinking about the worthlessness, everything around us?
I think the thing is, there are multiple layers around it. I think one is that if people actually thought about death more often, perhaps they would not engage as much as in the meaninglessness of things. Sometimes meaninglessness of things could be entertaining. It's a wonderful pastime. But when you're reflecting on something like mortality, you actually begin to have this vivid experience that moments are actually fleeting moments. It's not just poetry. It could be poetry, but these are fleeting moments, and so then it adds a kind of level of seriousness to life. You see, but it doesn't mean that you lose the sense of humor or that you lose the sense of fun. All it implies is that you begin to enrich every aspect of your life by knowing that this could be the last day, or tomorrow could be the last day, or it could be the last day with this particular individual. You see, and that's one of the things is that if you come to this sense of awareness that this could be your last day, imagine every last word that we have said to somebody else. The gravity of it, it might change. We might actually become more honest. We might actually become more kinder. We might actually become more caring individuals just by, a simple reflection on mortality. And again, remember that humans are one of the rare species that actually is aware of their own mortality. See, and so it's really remarkable that particular piece of information, this self-awareness around mortality, that what does our species actually can do with it.
Right. You spoke about your growing up years in India, and that's precisely this lovely book that you've written. Thank you for writing it. It makes me, privileged to read this, and then to see it almost feel like I know you, having read this book, know you almost through and through in terms of at least how you put it across. And I think what's fascinating about the book, Running Toward Mystery, The Adventure of an Unconventional Life, is how you essentially attune to the belief that, basically humans will look at the world through a lens that is either rational or irrational, whereas there is another domain that is beyond these two. And that's really what happened to you, Venerable, in terms of as a child, you had these dreams, and then you went to follow that dream in a very literal sense and actually found it. You ran away from home. I think for if there are any kids watching this, don't try this at home, running away from home. But honestly, I mean, in that spiritual journey, which is what you recounted in this memoir, is there anything that you consider as your favorite story?
As a favorite story, no, I think all the moments are favorites in one way or the other, and of course I had to narrow it down quite a bit in the sense that the last thing I wanted was it to be a 700-page book, which would have been more of a burden both for me and for the readers. So I had to really pick and choose, and I had good help from my students, and especially Zara, who has the students who sort of encouraged me to write. But I think I would say that there were certain moments that were more earth-shattering than others in terms of your experience of things. And so one particular episode that I have entitled in the book, "Is There So Much Joy in Your Religion?" I think that was one of those favorite moments where all this sort of experience around following a path or practicing a path where people think that it's okay to be miserable while being religious. and we develop a kind of complacency towards that sense of misery. It's almost like holy misery is somehow different from ordinary misery. But that was one of the shattering experiences when that simple question is asked about where is joy in your practice. So,
And was that question asked by a person who's no more, technically speaking, that you realized later that was in Calcutta?
that is correct. That happened in Delhi,
Right.
but yes, it was an individual who was there and then wasn't there the next day.
I mean, you've spoken about, sorry.
No, the thing is that as you saw that in the book, I have tried to suggest to individuals that we should not get trapped into these polarized conversations around rational and irrational. That we should try to find domains of non-rational experiences, and it's not to say that it only takes a certain kind of life to have those kinds of experiences. Many of our day-to-day things, when it doesn't make sense to us, you see, sort of already is moving into that domain of non-rational. But one of the things that as human beings, we also need to recognize that actually much of our thinking and much of our action is actually irrational. See, what is rational is our storytelling around it. You see, meaning that when we try to explain our actions to ourselves or to somebody else, we want to make it sound rational. You see, but we humans are highly irrational creatures. You see, but we like to think of ourselves as rational. But non-rational sort of moves beyond those two territories, where you actually suspend the desire to have rational explanation, because you recognize that there are certain limitations at that particular moment around it.
I mean, you had that one experience, what I think in regular terms we would call a paranormal experience.
Right.
One of the mentors, Sasaki, who's, and there's a blinding light that you saw in that room, right? That would be
Right.
Another one of those that you can't explain. And
Miracles are just events, meaning that whatever we deem as paranormal is outside of our normal domain of experiences. But for individuals who are in that particular kind of domain, it's just like common sense. Why wouldn't it be that way? And that's another thing that you recognize later on, I haven't touched on this book, but for one example, when I used to spend time at Kumbh Mela, in India, and you are there, with this cluster of, an intimate cluster of 15 to 20 million sadhus, you see, and you're observing things, you're talking to them, and everything is just like matter of fact, you see, which in another domain would be like every 2 minutes somebody would stumble and say, oh no, but that sounds paranormal, but that sounds mystical. But in this cluster of individuals, it was like, oh, it happened to you. Well, that's very interesting. It happened to this person as well. And the conversation just flows.
I guess if you're living, and perhaps I'm talking about those sadhus, as it were, and if you're living in that realm, it becomes harder perhaps to live in the realm where you're being questioned all the time, because everything that you're saying is paranormal. Yeah.
No, it is. I mean, even sort of in day-to-day sort of conventional life, I think that's one of the both the struggles and joy that of kind of trying to maintain a seamless journey or moving between sort of non-conventional or conventional experiences, where you're trying to sort of maintain a kind of semblance between what matters and what doesn't matter, and I think there's a lesson that is to be learned there. Meaning, it's not always sort of kind of a fantastical thing, but there are moments when there are certain kinds of insights that might arise that makes you also question everything around you. And that I think is I think the beauty of the non-rational.
Right. I mean, I'm also getting into, well, we talk about non-rational, but the other aspect I wanted to touch upon, Venerable, is the idea of non-violence, for instance. And there is the depressing part in the book, when one of your mentors, Nambate, who's uh, killed for being a monk, I'm presuming, right? I mean, and you also like mentioned another person in Sri Lanka who was similarly killed. Now, when you live in a society like that, of course, not all of us would have possibly faced violence of that nature in our personal lives. But in general, when you live in a society like that, which is it could be emotionally, violent in its own way. How difficult is it to keep the faith, as it were, especially when humans in general are attuned for self-preservation and therefore self-defense all the time?
Well, that's a very good question. I think one of the challenges, again, is to maintain a sense of optimism or hopefulness, especially in humanity and especially in the most challenging times. And not only in the experience with these individuals, but also with some of the work that I've been doing around conflict resolution and both in Asia and Latin America. There are moments when you experience a sense of despair and you ask yourself, well, where is all this going, or can it be changed, and so on. But I think that's again one of the places of strength that one's spiritual practice can offer, which is this it is a sense of sort of hopefulness and the ability for humans to change. And I think this is something that we need to ponder a bit more, in the sense that if we take away the possibility of transformation, if we take away the possibility of change, what is left of humanity? What is left of you? What is left of I say? And that's one of the things that I think those who are especially claiming to have a kind of religious bent of mind or a spiritual bent of mind, that they need to sort of focus more deeply on this promise of transformation. And it may not happen in a short period of time. It may not happen even within our lifetime. But the fact is that much of our work, even in the face of very sort of grotesque violence, is that we'll continue our work, and we hope that this person will change, or that this person will hopefully go through a kind of transformation. And again, I'm not an I don't believe in sort of idealism of some sense. So the timeline and the expectation needs to be realistic. But that's where I think the force of kindness or the force of compassion really sort of takes its flight, because otherwise it just becomes sort of a very passive talk of compassion and kindness. But it is especially in these kinds of scenarios that you begin to look at it as a game changer.
Do you think, in that sense, Venerable, that religion per se, and you have a beautiful line here which I'd like to read out right in a bit. Religion per se, or organized religion per se, is in a position to have the transforming effect, because we've had religions for thousands of years. It doesn't seem like it's made us better human beings, and certainly it's been so much about religions fighting each other about mine is better than yours. Has it really served that purpose? And where do you think it's sort of it's shown its flaws, as it were?
No, that is actually quite true. I mean, the thing is that you have to understand that at the end of the day, religious organizations and religious institutions at times simply become another instrument to fulfill the human desire of greed and deceit and power dynamics. See? And in that regard, then religious organizations are no different from any other organizations that are created and ruled by humans for exploitation of humans and so on. What is beautiful, I would suggest, in the spiritual or the religious framework is that at least it continues to allude to the idea that this is wrong. It continues to allude to the idea that such exploitation or such oppression of human and human minds is an incorrect way to live life. Now, having said that, I think that's why we are beginning to see a certain kind of resurgence in terms of one's interest in spirituality or religious life. But whether the organizations themselves are going to be legitimate, or whether those organizations will continue to live or flourish in the ways they have been flourishing in the past, is questionable. And so you begin to see that there's already tremendous kind of inner struggle and reformation that most of these religious organizations are forced to reckon with. Otherwise, they become obsolete, they become stagnated, and I think that has been one of the sort of ongoing historical challenges with religious institutions.
And you had a personal experience with that, where you mentioned that my holier than thou judgment was not peculiarly mine when you're referring to yourself, because you saw what you were being, and that self-righteous spiritual pride drives the sectarianism that plagues organized religion, and Buddhism is no exception. Now, if we are talking about organized religion in general, we're all aware of the havoc it wreaks across the world. And you worked and you've written about interfaith dialogue. Venerable, exactly how does one go about this interfaith dialogue, where one organized religion can look at the other and sort of just figure out a way to just stop being the way we are?
I think this is where the work of Father Thomas Keating, whom I mention in the book, is much more powerful, where he sort of speaks of this idea of interspiritual conversations or interspiritual dialogue, where we sort of just move beyond this kind of superficial endorsement of each other's religion and basically say your religion is good and mine is good as well, but we continue underneath all the tensions and escalations that go on. That I think you have to understand something, which is that what religious institutions do offer in terms of the preservation of a body of literature or a body of practice is basically an ability for individuals to explore it, to experiment with it, and go through a transformative process. If an individual fails to do that, then that individual fails to engage with that religious practice. Then we simply become sort of, kind of passive guards trying to protect a particular tradition and simply perpetuate the status quo and so on. So I think we need to start to rethink this idea that, firstly, we have to really give up this idea that there can be one dominant world religion. We have been trying it. We have been trying it for thousands of years. It just hasn't worked. And we have to come to recognize the fact that of the 7+ billion human beings on this planet, some will choose a particular path, some will design their own path, and some will perhaps suggest none of those things, you see. And all of those are valid in the sense that as long as people are willing to explore and transform, then it's fine. But we cannot be too quick again to dismiss religion as well. Meaning, again, the death of religion has been announced prematurely on many occasions. And even to this day, when people say, oh, with all the scientific advancement and all this cliche that religious organizations have to offer, that they're going to die out and so on. No, if you actually look at sociological data on religious beliefs and so on, religions are thriving. See? And in certain areas, the way they are thriving is worrisome. You see? Mm-hmm. So you have to then start thinking about, well, what kind of religion should actually thrive, in the sense that as long as we maintain a structure of curiosity, a structure of inquisitiveness, investigation, contemplative questioning, and so on, those might serve us better, regardless of whatever religious institutions we adhere to.
What about mixing of religion and politics, Venerable? I mean, it's a great way to leverage yourself and find yourself in power, right?
The thing is, and having witnessed one of the recent elections right here, in the United States. Separation of church and state is a myth. We like to think, again, we like to rationalize and say that should be, yes, in an ideal civic society, that ought to be the case. But religion is such a powerful influence in people's worldviews and the way they make choices and decisions that you see it anywhere in the world. You see that wherever religion or religious organizations are active, you will see it seeping itself into policy development, into policy framing, into voting, and things of that nature. So I think the idea is that we shouldn't blindly suggest separation of church and state, but we should be more informed about how much meddling happens between church and state, so that we can design better policies, and we can design policies that would be beneficial to the larger civic society, and not just to a particular religious group. And that's where I think, like Ashoka's framing in India of secularism as Sarv Dharm Sambhav, that it wasn't just some idealism that, all religions should thrive and flourish under a system of good governance. But all it was suggesting is that let's take it all into account, and let's give them the opportunity to bring out the best and take the best and see if we can actually include it in our policy development. And I think that would be the way to go.
Also, before I get on to the question from the audience, we have some already elsewhere. And just a quick last one. I'm a journalist, so I just have to ask some journalistic questions. What do you make of Islamophobia, Venerable? I mean, from one end of it, which is deeply fanatical at one end, and then there is the other end, which is equally fanatical, which is the response to it. Where do you think we're headed with Islamophobia, which has really gripped most of the planet at this point from a political perspective?
I think it's not an issue that we are going to be able to solve overnight, for sure. It does require a tremendous amount of patience and understanding on both fronts. The challenge is this. The challenge is that, we need to move past the argument that the majority of religion is not such or not so-and-so. Meaning that you have to understand that, unfortunately, the world that we live in, loudness matters. And even if it's a small group of people who happen to be loud, they are the ones who are setting the emotional tone. They are the ones who are setting the tone of conversation. So I do believe, and I do hope, that the large chunk or the large percentage of moderate Muslims will actually make their voices heard, will actually sort of, rather than sort of just saying that they don't belong, nobody has the way to say that, I am a true Muslim and this person is not a true Muslim. You see, this is sort of the back and forth of argument that we see in all kinds of religion, as to who claims to be an authentic practitioner of whichever particular tradition, right? But the thing is that we do need to sort of start giving rise to particular kinds of platform where we are not simply speaking in terms of reactionary tone. We are not simply speaking languages of persecution, but we are actually speaking a language of moving beyond, a language of healing, and a language of recognizing that this is how we have perpetuated violence, emotional, spiritual, physical violence for the last thousands of years. Now we are at this juncture where we could change the course of this conversation. Let's take this opportunity. Let's make something of it.
And so you're saying that interfaith dialogue also means dialogue within the faith, within various thought processes. I have a question from Emma. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, oftentimes what happens is that, when you get to interfaith conversations, you see the same faces and the same voices again and again and again. And it's like
it's a seminar circuit, right?
It's a seminar circuit, and that's the thing that at some point, it's a nice symbolic gesture that we need to see, but you have to start questioning the utilitarian aspect of it. You see, so you have to go deep down to places where there are actually people who have vehemently disagreed with you and disagreed with your propositions, and try to see if that's where we can build platforms for conversations.
Right. I'm going to take questions. This is from Emma Thompson, Venerable. We're all living in strange times when religion gets frequently debased into blind belief. Do you think Buddhism, with its spirit of inquiry, offers a way of harmonizing faith with rationality?
I would like to think so. I would like to think that the spirit of inquiry or investigation is built into the tradition. But does that imply that Buddhists cannot succumb to blind belief? No. We as humans, we all have the tendency to succumb to blind faith. And so one of the things that we as individuals are responsible, and as traditions, it should be a responsibility, is that we encourage healthy inquiry. We encourage healthy disagreements within the tradition as part of the process of learning and the process of growth.
Venerable, the argument of a lot of vehement atheists is that faith in itself is blind. What do you make of that?
No, I think that's a very pedestrian argument. It's a very pedestrian argument, meaning that it's taking a particular version of faith. You see, but if you take sort of the Indic aspect of faith, Shraddha, you see, and if you sort of look into the etymology of the word Shraddha, it implies trust building by virtue of knowing, meaning you have to understand your object of faith, you have to understand your object of worship, and so you already see that you're pushed to sort of you have to sort of understand the boundaries of reasoning. You have to understand the boundaries of the intellectual pursuits in order to build that sense of trust before you get into that state. But the thing is, you have to understand, whether we believe in something or we don't believe in something, we carry our day-to-day preoccupations of life with so many faiths. It doesn't need to be religious. Right. The faith that I am going to wake up tomorrow morning is a blind faith. You see, the faith that this person that I take for granted is going to stay beside me forever is a blind faith. You see, so in our even secular, preoccupations of life, there are so many blind faiths, and we need to simply begin to eliminate many of those.
Okay. Question from Jessica Gomez. You've written extensively about teachers and their importance in your life. Has the definition of a teacher changed over the years?
Of course. It has, and now I see, and there's nothing to say that I won't change my mind again tomorrow about most of the things that I'm saying. But a teacher is a spiritual friend. A teacher is a virtuous friend. A teacher is somebody who encourages the goodness out of you. The teacher is somebody who makes you uncomfortable at times, perhaps for most part of your life, because the role of a teacher is to facilitate your sense of growth. You see, and that's what I think
Venerable,
the role of teachers are.
Sorry to cut you here, but you've written about this extensively in your book as well. And when you use the word friend, virtuous friend, of course, also Socratic idea of virtue being the reason why you should make friends. But there is an assumption of equality between friendship. That's an interesting way of looking at your teacher. Would you also say that you would look at them as an equal, a peer, rather than an up and down approach?
No, I mean, there is an hierarchy that might have started off initially in the relationship, but then there's a sense of peer, but it's not peer in terms of that you become buddies. You see, meaning they are not there to entertain you, right? So friendships are of many classes, and not all friendships are equal. Your professional friendships are not equal. Even your personal friendships are not equal. Meaning there are always differentiations of various kinds that happen even in our experience of secular friendships. But the whole idea of virtuous friendship is just the sense that somebody who allows virtue to flourish in you, right? And that we need to seek at least one friend of that nature in our life. Otherwise, we may end up with 3,000 very close Facebook friends, and none of them reliable when we really need them.
Right, right. Last question. Mass movements are increasingly being led by spiritual and religious leaders. While many such leaders have already existed in the milieu, they've always worked in the background to a fairly defined agenda. Should spiritual leaders play a greater role in mass mobilization, or should they focus on literally spiritual pursuits?
That's again a challenging question, in the sense that if you look at even some of the earlier spiritual teachers, it's not like they were seeking to build a movement. Movement just got built around them, either because of them or people who, close students who surrounded them, and so on. And even people who were like very quiet, even in this particular century, when you look at people like Ramana Maharshi and others, they didn't want movements built around them, but movement just got built. That's the nature of how humans function. We love to build movements. We love to create leaders. We love to create followers, and so on. And there's nothing sort of inherently wrong with it. I think what is inherently wrong with in the current context is when the primary occupation of a spiritual practitioner is not spiritual pursuit, but it is to garner followers,
Right.
but it is to garner movements. Then I think that our aspirations for a spiritual life is slightly misplaced.
I'm going to finish off with a hopeful note from you, Venerable. I have to tell you, I'm a hardened cynic, like a lot of people around me, and then it's really lovely for me to read a book like yours. Makes me look at things a little differently, for sure. But I've come from a thought process where we just think the world is what it is. It's not going to change, right? What gives you hope? And that's the last slide I'd like the audiences to have. What gives you hope about humans still, despite all that we've been through and will continue to go through?
Well, it's a complex thing, but there was a French sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu. He said that there are two ways that an individual can respond: clinical and cynical. Cynical, at its best, is entertainment. We can laugh about it and so on. But it's clinical that really heals the planet, that heals the individuals, and it makes sure that we don't perpetuate the toxic conditions of the past. So it's okay to be cynical from time to time, but I think we should find the clinicians in ourselves as well.
Well, thank you very much for moving us from cynical to clinical. This is lovely. Thank you very much. It was lovely talking to you, Venerable.
Thank you, man. Such a delight. Thank you.
Thank you, the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi and Mayank Shekhar, for that gorgeously beautiful conversation. Thank you. Thank you all for watching and being a great audience. We encourage you to buy the books of our speakers that are available through the Boulder Bookstore for the US and from Full Circle for India. We hope you all enjoyed these conversations and will log back on to watch our stellar list of sessions that will be on tomorrow at 6:15 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which is 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 5:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 6:45 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Now for Earth Fables. Artisans put their hearts and souls into the art they create, which makes each piece of work unique and with its own story to tell. Earth Fables, an initiative of Teamwork Arts and Craft Maestros, is a platform that keeps alive India's unparalleled art and craft with a range of products on offer across multiple categories such as apparel, accessories, jewelry, decor, and furnishings, as well as curated gifting ideas for corporates and festivals. All products have been sourced organically with extremely trustworthy provenance and from environment-friendly, sustainable ingredients and material. Our aim is to support India's diverse palette of artisans and their magnificent creations at a time when the country is reeling under the economic fallout of a devastating pandemic. And artists are really, truly in dire straits. Thank you. Thank you again, and see you tomorrow. Kesariya
I would call the Jaipur Literature Festival a living library, or perhaps even a library of life. Do join us as we share the excitement of ideas and of debate and dialogue, of the adventures of science, of the joys of poetry and music, the consolations of philosophy, the sense of literature and of life.
So much about the festival in India, the scale of it, the energy of it, and I just love the fact that there is this effort to bring it to other cities in the world.
It's a variety of topics. It's meaningful. I'm just excited. I'm feeling like I've learned a lot to think about, and I appreciate JLF coming here.
Going forward, it would be a very good thing to do for the community to have this event on an annual basis.
I think that when you hear so many different voices and perspectives about the South Asian diaspora and many other issues, you learn that there's a lot of history that you're not taught every day, and I think that that's important to bring in today's world.
I was actually really surprised by the camaraderie I experienced here and the way that people at JLF, both attendees and other panelists, seem to really connect profoundly to literature and care about it.
In 2020, our live version of JLF has been laid to waste because of COVID-19. However, nothing's going to stop us from coming in the way of bringing our writers and speakers to you in Boulder, Colorado, Houston, New York, and Toronto, Canada.
Teamwork Arts, bringing India to the world and the world to India through Indian art and culture for over 30 years. One of Teamwork Arts' signature events, the Z Jaipur Literature Festival, is the world's largest free festival of its kind. With daily interactive sessions, lively debate and dialogue, and international music performances every night, it's no wonder the festival attracts over 500,000 visitors a year. The Jaipur Bookmark, an international B2B event for the publishing industry, happens during the Z Jaipur Literature Festival and sees a confluence of publishers, writers, and literary agents. Teamwork Arts, producers of the Z Jaipur Literature Festival, have taken the flavor of the festival to international shores with vibrant events in the UK, Australia, and the US. Teamwork Arts takes India's artistic diversity to the world with almost 12 festivals of India across continents in a stunning array in over 40 cities. A feast for the senses, these are spectacles of dance, music, cinema, theatre, literature, and so much more. In each of these places, Teamwork Arts' colourful festivals of India are the high points of the annual cultural calendars. Spiet Confluence in Australia, India by the Bay in Hong Kong, India by the Nile in Egypt, Iron India in Chicago, Shared History in South Africa, India in the Sunshine City in Zimbabwe, Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Kalautsavam in Singapore, Sarang in South Korea, festivals in Abu Dhabi, Shanghai, Sweden. The list is dizzying. The Jazz India circuit is an endeavor by Teamwork Arts to spread the word and sound of jazz across the country. The 2017-18 season, 4 festivals across 3 cities featuring over 25 stellar artists from India and around the world, including Jojo Mayer and Nerve, drummer-singer Jameson Ross, and Dave Weckel, who collaborated with the talented Mohini Day. The Mahindra Kabira festival celebrates the spirit, lyric and verse of the 15th century mystic poet Kabir in his birthplace, the historic city of Varanasi. Kabir's poetry is about inclusiveness. Mahindra Kabira brings to music lovers an unforgettable experience of listening to leading exponents of the classical Banaras Gharana and rich folk traditions of music on the legendary banks of the mighty river Ganges, along with sessions on art and literature, specially curated walks with famous local residents and delectable local cuisine. The sacred celebrates the spiritual through music and its ability to heal. International artists collaborate with world music exponents from India amongst the most incredible desert settings on the banks of the Pushkar Lake. Heritage walks, meditation, talks and workshops are part of this weekend experience. Teamwork Arts also promotes and recognizes the best of Indian theatre through the Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Awards. The Meta Week in Delhi is an enthralling showcase of the 10 best nominated plays shortlisted from numerous entries received from across the country and across languages. The Meta Lifetime Achievement Award has been presented to leading lights of India's theatre industry. For the young and the young at heart, the Ishara International Puppet Theatre Festival brings local and international performances to audiences across several Indian cities. While the Multi-City Kahani Festival features interactive storytelling sessions and workshops championing the power of imagination. Bollywood Love Story, a musical. Our international touring productions such as Bollywood Extravaganza and Flamenco India have sold out shows across Europe, Egypt, Russia and Spain. Expressions International Contemporary Dance Festival showcases Indian and international productions, bringing together several dance genres for Indian audiences. Teamwork Arts, celebrating the arts. For more information, visit www.teamworkarts.com.
I think everywhere I've ever lived, I always looked for the library.
They come to the library because they want to be with people.
Corporations are not people in the library. People are people, right? And so being able to come in and participate and learn and control that learning experience is what we offer to the community. And that's a beautiful thing. It can develop into something amazing.
We want them to recognize that they have the agency and the potential to create change and have a voice.
To become what they hope to be, to empower them to realize their aspirations.
No matter who they are, no matter what age they are, no matter what their background or ability is.
We're going to learn together, right?
And you know what? Not just me, because I want to create together, but I think we want to create together.
Give us your knowledge. Give us what you do best. Give us your culture, give us good feedback, give us bad feedback, give us any feedback. Let us grow with you. Just come and ask too.
Ask a librarian. We're all here waiting to help you.
To work together, to collaborate, and to come up with a larger, louder voice as a collective.
We are bolder together.
We are okay, wait.
Somos bolder juntos.
We are bolder.
Bolder?
Bolder together.
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 We're bolder together, we're bolder together.
Hello everyone and welcome to Kahani Online. where you discover the magic of storytelling in all its forms.
Very special guest with a very special story.
Please welcome actor and author Soha Ali Khan.
The story that I've chosen is called Someday. Here it is. And it's by Alison McGee and Peter H. Reynolds. It's a story that I've read many times to Inaya.
Everyone, grab a pencil, eraser and a notebook as we are about to learn how to write short stories.
That's very simple. All you have to remember is 5 points.
Grumpy, we have a special story for you that dates back to the year 1962. Major Shaitan Singh Bhatti and his soldiers.
चीन ने भारत पर हमला बोला था। ये लड़ाई पूरा 1 महीना चली थी।
Our storyteller today is Katrina Zyle, all the way from Lithuania in
Europe.
Yes, in Europe. And she's going to tell us about some strange and fascinating mythological creatures.
Today I will introduce you all to Lithuanian mythology. I will show you our modern world full of hidden mythical creatures.
I will narrate to you an episode from one of our oldest epics, the Ramayana.
We'll be waiting to hear from you. Until next time, bye-bye!